So while they're getting on stage, I'll just make some very quick remarks, and also, in case you have questions for any of the speakers or panels, thanks, Mina, feel free to leave them in the app. We will try to get to them for any of the sessions. Real quick, David Beck is the branch chief for capability assessment and the principal for space logistics industrial base for the Space Systems Integration Office, Space Systems Command, and Los Angeles Air Force Base, California. Mr. Beck is responsible for assessment of industrial base support and sustainment, cybersecurity jointly with SSC, CIO, and Space Systems Integration Office, and working with government agencies, industry and foreign partners within the space community on future innovation, technology solutions, and space architecture. So we thank David for being here today. He's played a major role in advancing Canadian space, and we're very grateful. Glenn founded 19 Investments while serving as an assaulter officer in the Canadian Special Forces, Joint Task Force 2. As a squadron commander, Glenn specialized in leadership, command, and strategic planning, successfully translated these skills with the creation of a venture capital fund that invests utilizing the principles of special operations planning, risk mitigation, and execution. Having served on multiple combat deployments in Afghanistan, sensitive information operations in the Middle East, and hostage recovery operations in Africa, he was strategic planner and technical commander. A graduate of the McGill University, the Army Operations course, the Special Operations Assaulter course, Canadian Securities course, and Ivy Executive Leadership Program, arms Glenn with an unconventional perspective and application to the investment battlefield. And finally, Mina, was actually my TA back in undergrad, is co-founder and CEO of Kepler, one of Canada's greatest space companies, a company on a mission to build internet connectivity for space to improve access to space-generated data. Kepler was founded in 2015 after Mina and a group of graduate students recognized a gap in the global space market. Under Mina's leadership, Kepler has raised over $200 million in funding, growing to the largest Canadian satellite operator. Kepler was the first commercial company to announce successful demonstration of SDA-compatible optical intersatellite links in orbit and has received notable industry recognition. There's so much more to these individuals. So I think what we're going to do is start with some opening remarks, given the context of space launch, defense, assured access, resilience. We'd love to just hear as an audience, what are your general thoughts on space access and any opening remarks that you might have, and then we'll jump into some exciting questions. So maybe Mina, if we could get started with you, that'd be great.
Great. Thank you so much for having me here. It's really a privilege to be part of this panel with some really distinguished speakers. From my perspective, on an opening remarks basis, and part of the reason why we started Kepler as a company was with the view that space access has been redefined. So sort of gone are the days where it's controlled by trillionaires. Think of, Soviets or the US National Treasury being the people that have generalized access to space. And now it's become democratized where, early stage and commercial capabilities can be fielded on a much more rapid cost and schedule basis than you would otherwise expect. And on that premise, I think we have to be responsive to the new space domain and what we expect. And we're seeing increasingly around the world sort of domestic sovereign space strategies be formed all around the world, kind of independent of country size, shape, or form, where they can draw contribution or bring to bear unique capabilities. They really want to make sure that they can bring forward their own sovereign space strategy. And why? Because I think as we look to the world right now, there's a lot of unrest, and we need to be able to react to that unrest and be responsive as a domestic nation, as much as we've been partners and collaborators, and space is a great field that brings people all together. Having a sovereign capability and a sovereign interest is really important in the macroeconomic condition we face today.
I pay attention to that sign back there that says eyes on the skies. I think the picture of space is everybody's responsibility. It's not a sovereign nation or economic plan. It's basically everybody's responsibility. Everybody in this room, because of workforce development it takes to build space, is beyond the capabilities that most nations can ever think about themselves, including my nation. We have to look at it in a joint effort, because in my day job, I support access, mobility, and logistics for SSC for assured access to space, but throughout the space ecosystem, I support everybody. I work with every country that's a sovereign nation to support, protect, and defend. I work with every space company I can find that can build resiliency in space, because we need everybody. That's the full approach to it, because not only does it build opportunity to protect and defend, as Brigadier General Horner just said, but it also builds opportunity to elaborate, innovate, and educate the masses on how space is, because space has an identity problem. Most people don't know what space is about. They don't know what space incorporates in their daily lives, what protects them from a pharmaceutical innovation in space to an opportunity to use a cell phone and communicate and talk to a loved one on a cold, rainy day or warm summer night. And it's important for us to get that opportunity to build that through space innovation and space execution. And I'm glad to be here. Thank you.
Good morning, and this is an awesome conference, Rahul. So, props to you and your team for putting it on. In 1956, a guy named Robert Heinlein wrote a book called Starship Troopers. We're on the early stages of, modernizing what it means to have space as a warfighting domain. Starship Troopers, in the military contexts, is almost required reading on every commander's reading list. In the venture capital community where I am now, Starship Troopers is almost doctrine on how to build, think big, and create what was then science fiction turning into science fact. And that's where we are, and the change that we've seen since sort of the Cold War space race is upon us now, where there's a seismic shift in how space as a domain and among many other sort of disruptive technologies, the incumbents, be it government, big primes, who controlled this domain just simply because of a sphere of access, money, capital, time, has completely changed. And it's companies like Nordspace and a bunch of engineers in the room that are now proving that we don't need those big incumbents to access this domain. And the technologies and the thought process and the visionaries for what's happening in space are almost comical with how forward-leaning they are. Everything from 3D printing moon bases to mining the moon to building next generation fuel stations on the moon to launch us further into space. I'm not a space expert by any stretch, but we are investors in companies like SpaceX. And there is no better model than we saw recently, where the incumbents couldn't go and rescue 2 astronauts stranded on the ISS. It took a private company to do it. And I think that's an incredibly telling example of how conferences like this, ecosystems like private funding, private capital, and support of governments, and really smart people building cool stuff are going to change the way that we look and access and occupy space.
Thank you. Excellent opening remarks. So I guess we'll jump into some of the questions. And again, if any questions pop up in your minds, feel free to leave them in the app if you don't want to get up and chase a mic down. So double-clicking on some of the comments about assured access, but also in the context of working with our allies and partners. But we are hearing about the importance of assured access more and more. General Horner, of course, mentioned it. Why is assured access important for sovereign nations, even though we have strong and highly capable allies like the United States, especially for Canada, given its vast land, coasts, and borders, and not just space, perhaps, but across all domains? Why is assured access so important? Why have nations prioritized and invested in their own access capabilities for space when Canada has not? And in your minds, what signal does this send to our allies and even domestically? So, a lot of questions in there, but basically, what are your thoughts on assured access globally?
I would suggest there's a price and a cost to doing business in space or having sovereign capability on capabilities that are strategic of nature. In my former community, I was a special operations officer, and we had capabilities that gave us access to certain clubs. And in the military, there are other capabilities that are considered strategic. And in the levels of war, strategic often refers to where we shape policy and where we commit federal or large resources towards that. Some special operations and intelligence capabilities, submarines, and space, I think, are 3 really large strategic areas where our allies want us to participate. And historically, Canada has been a nation that takes a lot and doesn't give back. And I think if we want to have access into that club, the price is going to be the investment that we need to make into these capabilities, but the cost is not doing it, is denied access to that specific club. And so, you know, I think that is incredibly important. That has been illuminated recently and has gained a lot of attraction and attention through what we're hearing from the US administration south of the border. But I look at that as we've just been held to account. And like it or not, the Americans and our NATO allies have held Canada's feet to the fire and said, you guys haven't been paying your price, and the cost you're going to pay is access. And I think these types of capabilities give us not only the ability to have our own sovereign capability and everything that goes along with it, but it gives us agency over our own decisions. It gives us leverage to increase our position amongst our allies. And for me, the most important aspect is it gives us access to a really important club.
Yeah, David, I mean, similar, same question. And do you also feel that part of it is almost a price for admission for somebody like a country like Canada, where we have our own sovereign capabilities that allows us to get into that club with the U.S. and others? You know, we're serious about assured access.
I agree with you, it does, but also look at it like this. I mean, most people, when they want to go into a club, they don't ask for permission to walk in the door. Sometimes they make themselves known. I think that's one of the things you have to start doing. And I do appreciate everything the Canadian Space Agency has done to support our missions. And no doubt about it. Everybody who knows me know I appreciate that. But I'll say also at the same time, is when you grow up and become who you want to be, you have to step on your own, do your own thing. You have to let everybody know that you are important to the nation, to everybody else, and to our sovereignty, and to the terms of how you build your economy. And honestly, if our Canadian space agencies here in this room were doing great things and grow as they should grow, the North American as a continent is a safer place from a protect and defend, not just U.S. You can't defend by yourself. I, by myself, cannot defend everybody in this room. But if I had these three gentlemen with me and we all three of were to force to men with in terms of capability, I have a better protection zone for everybody sitting in the audience. And that's how space works. We have to be in that type of perfecting. We have to work together. We have to build the ecosystems. And as my colleague said next to me, private and public partnerships are the way to go, but also bringing down the cost of how it is and how it does and how it defends the sovereignty by having a capable space systems that are reasonably priced. You guys understand exactly what I'm talking about for how things are in Canada. I mean, I had a guy talk to me in this hotel this morning about how, as an airline pilot, he would get twice as much if he went to the U.S. I want him to get paid the same. I want everybody to get the opportunity to do the same thing, because I wanted to be a pilot when I was a kid and I couldn't do it. So I look up to him, what he's doing. So I think from a space capability, people know that there are the smartest people in the room in space. They understand that the people in space are a very uniquely specific, nerdy group of people, and I'm glad to be a part of that community, but we also got to understand that we need support, we need help, and we need to collaborate. And I tell you right now, if we don't get it together around this globe and space, something may happen that might pull us together, and I don't want that to happen. I want us to do it in peace and quiet and without all the political mess we've been going through lately. I think that's kind of messes with everybody in the room. I think we like to do things as engineers and that makes sense, that build humanity and without a lot of political intake. But unfortunately, it's not the place we are in right now. So like I said before, we have to keep our eyes on the skies and focus on what's important and build that.
Awesome. Mina, I mean, I'd love for your thoughts on that question, but also you're in a unique position where you're developing countless satellites. How does assured access, how do you think about that as a Canadian company and getting to space, especially in the current context?
Yeah, so I agree with everything that's been said, and I'll just take a completely or slightly different tack to it. Interesting enough, when we market our communication service, we market it as assured service or persistent service or scheduled. And the most popular tier, if you want to take a guess, is assured services. So it's just resonate with what people are after and what the market needs, not from the perspective of what they're willing to pay, but what they think is practically impactful to their ability and their missions, which is one anecdote. The second thing, I don't know how many people in the room have been on a program and received a DPAS rating that they've had to deal with. And if you've ever had to deal with a DPAS rating, you know how disruptive that could be both to your supply chain and all the downstream requirements on what you're trying to deliver for. And so when we say we're delivering an assured access, it kind of goes from soup to nuts as to where are we getting what parts from where, so we can actually fulfill the promise of an assured access. Because a time of peace, there's a lot of great collaboration, but as soon as that gets disrupted, all of a sudden you can see that the imagery or the comms or whatever it may be that you're looking for a region of interest becomes deferred over to a defined program of record, and you all of a sudden lose your assurances. And much like with any context, any meeting, any employment that you're after, you tend to find, what value do I bring to the table? Before you can ask for anything, my operating principle is give, and then ask for something in exchange. And so you always have to, in the same vein, come forward with what is your value proposition. And if you don't have that as a nation, then it's really hard for you to kind of draw that collaboration and provide that ability to get other assurances from other nations. So I think that goes back to the theme of, yes, collaboration is critically important, but to be a good collaborator, you need to bring value to the table, pay the price at the seat of the table. And why you want to do that independent of the collaboration is because you need your own assurances on access, and that kind of shows up for us. And when we sell stuff to the market, well, what are we selling? We're selling assured access. And how much diligence do people go through before they buy our product? They want to know that all through our supply chain, even our staff, how well assured is everything through to the finished product that you're actually getting at the goal line. And so I think that kind of speaks to what are the broad needs we're seeing both in industry and for space at large.
Yeah, thanks, Mina. Great. The next topic is a bit more focused on investing in defense, and I think all of you bring some very unique perspectives as investors, as seekers of innovation, as folks who've raised a tremendous amount of capital. Investing in defense in Canada has traditionally been unpopular, some might even say stigmatized in some cases. This has led to almost a near absence in risk capital being deployed by both institutional and retail investors in Canada. Certainly early stage private venture capitalists who often take on the greatest risk, like yourself, Glenn, and others. But recently there's been this feeling in the air that maybe investing in defense and sovereignty in Canada and that from that regard isn't necessarily a bad thing. Why, in your opinion, has Canada lagged behind in investing in deploying risk capital in defense-related technologies? What can we learn from foreign nations like the U.S. who have done this exceptionally well over the last many decades? And any experiences or anecdotes you want to bring into your conversation around raising, deploying capital, or seeking innovative companies would be very helpful. Maybe Glenn, we can start with you.
Defense is not a dirty word. In Canada, it's been a taboo subject to invest in, and that starts at the top. And leadership by example, we hear a lot of, hey, we're going to invest in defense. And what does that actually mean? On the surface, it's let's award a shipbuilding contract to a prime. But in my world, it is let's get as much capital as we can into your hands so that you are armed with a capability that you can build. And capital is a capability. And we don't traditionally in Canada view it that way. We just think the more money we throw at a problem, we're going to solve the problem. But that is actually kind of false. We have to throw smart money at the problem, and we often get scared by the term high risk. But like newsflash, space is risky. Defense is risky. Special forces is risky. Venture capital is risky. We shouldn't be afraid of risk. We should be smart about it and mitigate it accordingly with supporting plans and contingency plans. There's a way to do this. In Canada, defense investing casts a really wide net. And it pains me to say, but defense investing in the startup world is lumped in with investing in cryptocurrency, gambling apps, pornography, and cannabis. I mean, think about that. Because in the same breath, we say we need to invest in defense, and the Canadian Armed Forces is the proud institution in Canada, which it is. The CAF is a fundamentally important institution in Canada, and we should invest in it. And then we lump it in with cryptocurrency and cannabis. Like, give me a break. So our leaders need to grow up and recognize that if we're going to be a mature player, we need to sort out the governance around how we categorize defense investing. And I'll caveat that in saying I look at early stage startup, venture-backed companies and investing. The way that is played out is that the deployers of capital, Canada's largest venture capital deployer is Business Development Bank of Canada. And in their LPAs and their governance documents, they say we can't invest in defense. Well, defense is massive, and defense embraces everything from building a cloud compute capability to AI to machine vision to like autonomous systems. I mean, to space to dual use to kinetic energetic weapon systems that kill bad guys. Because again, another newsflash, that's the job of the Canadian Armed Forces, is to fight Canada's wars. And we better get really comfortable in saying that. Now, if you want to carve out that on investing, that's fine. Say, hey, I don't want to invest in kinetic energetic weapon systems that kill people. No problem. But be very specific in the words you use on how you want to carve that out, because by simply saying we don't invest in defense, you're painting a really broad brush. And to summarize this point quickly, there's an incredible amount of private capital on the sidelines in Canada that are ready to back these types of companies, but we need our federal government to give them permission. And the best way for the federal government to give permission to private capital investors to start pouring money into this sector is for them to invest in it themselves.
Amazing. David, please.
You had some really good points. I think the investment side from our country has been Silicon Valley, right? Back in the 70s and 80s, all these guys get up and start all these companies and look at technology infusion, working with DARPA and ARPA-E and all those organizations within the government and building that equity where the U.S. government was going out and saying, hey, we can build and create technology internal, but things have flipped since the Silicon Valley rush. And there's a lot of different Silicon Valleys now, not just the one in Northern California, because space started in Southern California with U.S. market. And today, we still hadn't developed it like we should, but the thing is, with the venture side is, there's a lot of different people looking at how can we make money off of space. And I know a lot of people here are engineers and scientists don't want to hear that, but the return on investment is the biggest part of the influx of space in the U.S. And one of the things we should look at is, okay, yeah, they want the money, but we're going to give them the best engineering we can, the best robust technology we can, so that, yeah, they're going to make money off the companies that they invest in, but at the end of the day, that infuses innovation, which builds a space ecosystem. I think for Canada, probably need to do a little more of that as well. There's a lot of great companies like North Space, other companies in the room that I've worked with and talked to the last year or two about innovations in space and how important that plays a part, not just for the Canadian space infrastructure, but for everybody. I mean, you look at it, overall, investment in space in Canada is not just beneficial to Canadians, but beneficial to the world. Because you look at everybody who's invented in space, from ESA to other space entities around the world, all the technology and all the innovations that they spent from their sovereign countries has benefited globally everybody. So we need to start doing that. And another thing I think we should do is collaborations across investment portfolios to bring in other countries into similar technologies and opportunities to do spaceports and in different types of innovative rocket propulsion systems and designs of future technology in space where we can do medicines and build hospitals in orbit and do all kind of breakthrough technologies as well. So one of the things I talked about a few months ago when I was in my office, we had a meeting with a bunch of investors on the phone, a bunch of space people. They're looking at building 3 space stations. I said, that was a bad idea because 3 space stations are trillions of dollars and the launch one in 2030 would be a really a feasibility study going amok because you look at it, if you need to build something that's modular, that can use a lot of different amenities from Canada, Mexico, the other different nations who have the talent in those areas and have it a collaborative effort, much bigger than the International Space Station, where everybody knows that's about to pretty much fall out the sky. I'm not saying it will, hope it doesn't, but it's really bad and ruined right now. We got to build a better ecosystem. See, the approach that I talked about was building 1 space station, and then when you build that, you take that technology, and then Canada can build their own station, and other countries can build their own stuff off of that platform, but we need to build it collaboratively and share technologies with an IP agreement, leasing those IP agreements, not just taking them and hold them captive for reasons of prosperity for themselves, but for everybody to use, because space is an open aperture, and we need to treat it as so. Thank you.
Yeah, Mina, comments on investment capital deployment.
So I kind of maybe have a slight disagreement with the question in the sense that I don't believe in Canada that the air has really changed in terms of what's happening in space, and I think we have to proactively make that change take place. And I'd summarize it as two parts of the problem, because I spent a lot of time thinking about this. On the one side, it's a stigma, and it's a stigma, we can't talk about defense or the warfighter. Those words are not widely accepted, and it's generationally dependent. So, and we looked at these study statistics. I'd encourage everybody to take a look at Build Canada, which is an organization that's going out to publish nonpartisan memos on things we think are good policy decisions in Canada. And we went and looked at this problem, and if you take a look at earlier age demographics, say like 25 to 35, there's a huge stigma around working in that domain, talking about it. But if you look at demographics, say like 45 to 65, there's a lot more interest in spending time in defense, spending money in defense, and so that's one attribute as to why the problem exists. The second, and I think the far more important attribute, is in the US, there is a clear line of sight to progression from, yes, I will take on high-risk technology, new team development, but where do I go to sell it? How do I make money off of it? How does it become a product? In Canada, we lack that organizational mandate or that growth trajectory to say, here's how you crawl, walk, and run, and these are the requirements coming downstream, and what is the capability we're looking to buy, and how we're looking to buy it. A lot of the policy decisions stemming top-down are offsetting contributions, which is one way to drive policy, where we go in and we say, we'll give you grants to offset your cost of labor, we'll go out and pay for those fixed fees, but there's a completely different and highly levered alternative, which is procurement, and no kidding. So when we talk about investment, the type of investment really, really, really does matter. And if it goes downstream and says, I will buy this capability, $1 of revenue on a company's P&L is worth, 3 to 10 times that of $1 being spent as an offsetting grant or contribution. And because people can take a look and see that there is a market, there exists a need, there is a demand for it. And for so long as we don't drive those policy frameworks forward, where we have other transactional authorities or government agencies that have the mandate to buy commercially or go out and draw that broad procurement and show the real market need, because government by and large is your first and foremost and your largest procurer of these services. Even though they may be dual use, government is what ends up seeding and anchoring your product and technology. For so long as we don't have those transactional authorities, Canada will lag behind. And for so long as policy mandates continue to promote the offsetting contributions or grants to, on the front end, help save cost, that won't allow people to get the downstream surety that these investors need to go out and pour capital behind the market. So I think my main message across would be, we need to drive a commercial procurement arm within Canada. We need to have those other transactional authorities. We need to borrow from the great learnings that we've seen in the US and adopt them here, because that will help to incentivize all the early stage and downstream capital, because they can see a light or a clear light at the end of the tunnel.
Thanks. Fantastic responses. We're pretty short on time, so I'm gonna, just remark on the next question and then rapid fire ask the one after that, just for a quick thought. But I totally resonate with the defense angle. We in Canada, we stopped saying the word rockets when we're talking about our products, and we call them launch vehicles. When we're in the United States, nobody cares when we talk about rockets, but we could see the air leave the room when we mention rockets in Canadian context. But hopefully that's changing a little bit. I hear you, Mina. The defense, I guess, has kind of, seemingly, at least on the surface, seems to become a bit of a bipartisan issue in Canadian politics. Not a bad thing, but of course it's really hard to see or understand how deep that really goes. We do have an opportunity here, as I think, you're mentioning, to redefine that the next several decades, perhaps, of defense and security in Canada from a policy procurement standpoint. With like 2 minutes left between the three of you, if you had a single recommendation for this new government that's coming in, which obviously is a tall order and hard to ask of, but what would it be? What is the thing that you think would make the biggest impact to drive defense innovation, sovereign capabilities, assured access, and everything else forward in Canada? David, sounds like you want to start.
I think one of the most important things is infuse incubators, accelerators. We have Strat-5 TAC-5s in the U.S. I run 3 TAC-5 Strat-5s, 5 SIBRs, but I wrote 160 letters of recommendation to startup companies. So I would say take the same measurements to go and infuse, right, support these companies, infuse the technology. If it's not a lot of money at first, just give all you can to help them, bring them in and help them write business plans, how to build their aperture for investing, bring venture capital, like hit into the picture to get them infused and learn how to do that. But also look at the procurement process and make it a rapid process. Give them time to expand their capabilities so that they can do a Tier 06, as Brigadier General Horner said, you'll take that to a 9, because that's something we need right now.
Glenn, Mina?
We need to increase public-private partnership. The world we're in right now is kind of governed by speed and agility, and that's not a characteristic strength of any government. And so I would strongly recommend that Canada put together a privately managed pool of strategic capital that we can rapidly deploy, embrace failure, fail fast, fail early, fail often, to drive that iterative innovation process. We don't have an innovation problem in Canada, we have an adoption problem, as was mentioned. And you know, to military commanders or government end users at the coalface of this problem, my ask would be share as much as you can around your priorities, your pain points, your obstacles, and issue a call to action to the private sector to solve those problems.
I'd say developing a national space strategy that prioritizes commercial procurement of goods can move mountains for us all. Today, we cannot afford the average Canadian procurement timeline of 16 and a half years to go from inception to fielding capabilities. That's not something we can tolerate in this domain. And so developing a national space strategy with the mandate to go buy commercial capabilities, show people crawl, walk, run, how they can grow to become products, will have completely outsized impacts.
Thank you all again, and I couldn't agree more. I mean, it's not a mistake that we had General Horner giving the keynote. Defense panel is the first one. We've been searching for years for who in the Canadian government, starting with civilian agencies, would send the demand signal that sovereign capabilities, assured access launch is important. The only place it's come from is defense, and we're going to see more and more of that intertwining between defense and space if those civilian agencies don't take on leadership and send those demand signals that we desperately need. But so much to talk about. I wish we had more time. I can't thank you all enough for your time on this panel. Please meet our panelists later during the breaks, but with that, thank you very much. Round of applause for these gentlemen, please. Thank you.